Hi there. Welcome back to Looking at History. My name is Nick Raposo. I was recently in England and I got a chance to go to the Admiralty Archives in London, in Woolwich, and I got to speak to Andrew Choong, who is the curator of historic photos and ship's plans at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England. At the Woolwich outstation, he showed me something absolutely fascinating, and I can't wait to share it with you. This is just part one, so stay tuned for parts 2, 3, and 4, because they are amazing.
My name is Andrew Choong, and I'm part of the team that looks after the ship's plans and historic photographs collection at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. And I'm here today at the museum's outstation in the Woolwich Arsenal, the old brass foundry building, which is where most of those two collections are housed, and it's where I'm normally based. To give you a bit of background to where I'm standing, because as you can see, it's a rather interesting looking building and it doesn't exactly have purpose-built archive written all over it. We are standing in an old cannon factory, specifically brass cannon, that was built in 1717 to fulfill the needs of the Army and the Navy and to provide a more efficient site for the production of these weapons. The building lasted in this role for about 100 years until brass guns began to go out of fashion as they were replaced by iron ones. But the government was left with this rather large structure that they weren't totally sure what to do with. So it carried on producing some small brass work for the succeeding centuries. And it was also used variously for storage, for maintenance, for administration. And it largely carried on in those roles until the museum acquired it towards the end of the 1970s for the purpose of moving the plans and photographic material in here. And that has been its function with us as an institution ever since. Now, here in front of me, I have a rather gloriously large set of plans relating to one of my favorite vessels from the Royal Navy's history, and that is the Armored Cruiser HMS Cressy of the Cressy class. Now, as with so many ships that have made their mark on history and moved on, there are no surviving examples of the Cressy class anywhere in the world today, except underwater, and they're a bit hard to get to, or even close. So in the absence of the original vessel, these plans represent a unique and important historical record because from a visual sense, they are the only way you can give yourself a proper tour of the ship as they appeared at a certain point in their careers. So returning to the size of these plans, the reason they are so huge is because they're drawn at a scale of 1:48. Now, from the days of Samuel Pepys, the Admiralty had decided that they loved 1:48 as a scale. It made sense in the days of the wooden walls because even the largest ships would only come to plans of about this size, 3 or 4 feet in length at the outside. But they loved this scale so much that they persisted with it all the way through this period until the First World War. During that war, the designs were drawn up for some pretty immense dreadnoughts and battle cruisers, and the one that I think broke the camel's back were the two Renown class ships. The very first design plan drawn for those two was drawn at this scale, and it is somewhat over 23 feet in length. Perhaps unsurprisingly, every subsequent plan for them and for a lot of the large ships the Royal Navy designed are drawn at half the scale, so 1:96, so the drawings become sensible again. I take my hat off to the people who drew that first plan. It must have left them absolutely exhausted and brain dead, and they probably just thought, please let's not do this ever again. One of the things that would really strike you looking at these plans for the first time is just how beautifully executed they are. You've got the color wash, you've got the shading, but this is not just artistic license for, making the plan look pretty. There's also a very serious color coding system going on behind these. So if you can see these dark blue lines here, these denote armor plating and the protected areas of the ship, and the thickness is drawn to scale. So you can see on this vertical armor here, you've got a very thick line compared to the thinner horizontal armor that lines the deck. Generally speaking, the Admiralty favored a color scheme of bluish gray for standard fittings, machinery. They did also sometimes favor a rather interesting shade of lilac for heavy armor and weapons, although curiously in this case with Cressy they had stuck to the grey. Wood, unsurprisingly, is for wooden furnishings. Ochre brown was the favorite. And they would use a kind of yellowy gold for special castings and forgings, things like condensers in the engine room. The different shades actually highlight some interesting features of this ship, because you'll notice that the bottom of the hull is outlined in brown. And no, you're not dreaming, the ship was sheathed in wood originally. Does this sound a bit counterintuitive? It should do, but here's the reason why. During the Victorian era, as iron shipbuilding developed apace, designers discovered a rather serious problem. In the happy days of the age of sail, to prevent marine organisms from growing on the hull and slowing your ship down, the easiest solution was either to coat it in mixtures of various foul substances, or later on to copper it, attach copper plates to the hull. These were the most effective for keeping the nasties at bay. The only problem is, when you get to iron, you suddenly bump up against something called electrolysis, where copper and iron don't cooperate very well. And if you nail copper directly onto iron, they will start to fall apart from being in contact with each other. So what's the solution to this? Well, falling back on what they knew, if a ship was due to go on long service or foreign service in seas where ships could suffer more from marine organism growth in tropical waters, the solution was to cover the submerged part of the hull in wood and then hammer your copper onto that. Does it sound incredibly labor intensive? Yes, it was. And was it expensive? Absolutely. Did it work? Yes. So that remained the situation until proper anti-fouling paint was developed around the turn of the 20th century. So the curious thing for these ships, Cressy and her sisters, and another example of how they straddle one era and another, is the earliest members of the class begin their lives with wooden sheathed hulls with coppering on the outside. By the end of their lives, they've done away with all that nonsense and their hulls are just painted over with proper anti-fouling substances. One of many, many interesting stories that run through this historical document like a thread.